Bullshit.
Pretend for a moment we've entered a parallel universe, free of bullshit and full of bold solutions. That's what the No BS show's all about. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Let's cut the BS. A furniture company spends a ton on advertising. When potential customers enter the store, a help wanted sign is taped to the front door, and you can tell it was created with a black Sharpie marker, handwritten. A woman who calls a senior living community to inquire about the possibility of her mom moving in is placed on hold for nearly 10 minutes. A marketer presenting her company's products to a group of senior citizens takes 3 personal calls on her cell phone during the presentation. 3. One's bad. Sadly, these are real-life examples of bad customer experiences and lost opportunities. After investing in advertising, hiring salespeople, and training customer service staff, many companies neglect a key step. Market research shows on average only about 10% of dissatisfied customers or prospects complain to someone within the store or company. Roughly 90% will not tell you when they're dissatisfied. If they're not complaining, what are they doing? Probably shopping elsewhere. It costs a lot more to attract a new customer than to keep an existing one. In many cases, as much as 6 times more to attract a new one than to keep an existing one. Successful businesses find out what their customers and prospects are seeing and hearing, what they like and don't like, and then do something about it. You'd be amazed at what you can learn from secret shopping or mystery shopping. Salespeople might be saying things that would make you cringe. Customer service staff could be rude or impatient. While sophisticated secret or mystery shopping can be conducted by outside firms, you can start with a do-it-yourself approach. Build a simple plan to shop at various times and track your findings. Fortunately, most companies learn many employees are doing what they're supposed to do. In those instances, the findings from the shops can be used for positive reinforcement and motivation. However, when things are amiss, the information helps with mentoring and training of staff. You've worked hard to bring in new customers and prospects. Bad experiences lead to lost sales and negative word of mouth for years to come. Seeing through your customer's eyes and adjusting accordingly is a key part of successful marketing and sales. Secret shopping can show you what a real customer experience is like. It's definitely something to see. Our guest today is Greg Joseph, a member of the band The Clarks. Yes, The Clarks. They've been on David Letterman. They've been around Pittsburgh for an astounding 30 years with the same 4 guys in the band that were in it from the beginning. He's also on the board of WYEP. He has his own company called Sonic Dog, and he's a professor at Point Park University. Now, during our conversation, Greg talked about a lot of things, and I'm going to recap a couple of them before we cut into the meat of this interview. When you're deciding on a name of a band, there's some great stories out there about how bands have been named. And Greg and his bandmates noticed that there were bands like the Smiths using common last names. He was working at a copy company on McKnight Road in the North Hills, and many customers came in on one day that had the same name. So he came back to the band and said, hey, why don't we try the name The Clarks? They were under pressure to have a name for a battle of the bands that weekend. They said, what the hell, we'll go with it. They went with it. They won the battle of the bands, and now their name has been The Clarks for 30 years. Serendipity, my friends, but it also shows that when you're crystal clear on what you want to achieve, and they wanted to get a simple name that would be memorable. They wanted to do what was in the trends those days, which was the Smiths. So they went with the Clarks, and it worked. Another conversation that Greg and I had before we went live with the show was I talked about how, ironically, back in my WDAD days, because we were both at IUP at the same time in the mid to late 80s, and WDAD had a major promotion on 7th Street. They closed down 7th Street, and they were going to have an all-day event. And since I was the young DJ, probably a freshman or sophomore, they said, why don't you introduce this new band? So back in one of their earliest shows at IUP, on stage, I introduced the Clarks. And I wish I could say that I would have predicted that we'd be doing a podcast with Greg Joseph, one of the founding early members, and one of the ones, I shouldn't say founding early, because all four were together from the beginning, and they've been the Clarks. I also wanted to say again, he has his own production company, Sonic Dog. He's on the board of WYEP, and he's a college professor at Point Park University. So, Greg, one of the things that I talk to my students about at IUP, where I'm an adjunct faculty member, is I often say how important it is to gain valuable experience at any job that you do. It could be at McDonald's, it could be a dishwasher, it could be working as a caddy for the golf, it could be any kind of freelance work on the creative side, and how those things can play a big role. And I know throughout the building of the Clarks, you all had part-time jobs and that helped with you being at a print shop to print the flyers, and you had another person that worked at National Record Mart. You had a person that worked in IT that helped with the database. So talk about how important those early jobs are and how valuable that experience can be.
I think, any experience you have, especially in this field, and I'm teaching in the sports, art, and entertainment management program at Duquesne, I shouldn't say that, at Point Park. I almost said Duquesne, which I love as equally as much, but the students in that program need to get out. It's a major where you can't sit back after 4 years and just throw out resumes. The kids that are completely engaged since their freshman year, they're the ones that are making it. They're the ones that are working for the local promotion companies. They're the ones that are working for Stage AE, getting the good experience as they move along. We can only teach so much from a book or from our notes, but I like to consider that more preparation for them walking in the door, and I'm totally comfortable with helping students get in the door in a place where they can get real world experience. There's a total disconnect, especially in that particular major, if you don't have experience.
So as the company, tell us a little bit of that story in 86, 87, 88. Which of those years did you start growing where one member finally said, okay, I'm going to manage the business side and I'm going to go full time and I'm going to draw this amount of money? When does that happen?
That became, I think, pretty evident that Scott, our lead singer, would be the first person to step out of a day job. First of all, he hated work. So there's incentive number one. Number two, he and Rob, our guitar player, had a side project that they called the Dick Clarks, which was the two of them doing sort of the solo acoustic thing where they could make a couple of bucks to make a living. So that was a pretty steady thing, and so Scott was the first to step out of his job. I believe I would have been the second, and I was fired from my job. I worked at the Art and Entertainment News Weekly in Pittsburgh, and I was doing sales and doing a half-assed job at doing that because I was putting so much time into the band and a lot of time into the sales thing that something had to give, and I don't think I ever would have quit. And so this firing was really a blessing to me. I remember driving out to my folks' house after I got fired from work, and there was a part of me that was literally crying, and there was a part of me that was so happy that I had been, the chains were sort of, unleashed from me, and I was just in this crazy roller coaster of emotions, and ultimately ended up being really liberating.
I was just telling someone a couple of days ago who is in a situation they're unhappy and they're nervous and they think they might be going to get fired. And I said, when you go through a major change and you leave a position that wasn't a fit, there's fear, but there's also, like you said, you feel that the chains are left off, and there's also relief.
Yeah, and I think in today's society, if you don't get fired at some point, you I don't know, maybe you haven't challenged yourself or you haven't challenged your company. That sense of loyalty and being afraid to get fired, I think, is a little odd almost these days.
Yes, I agree. So it is the No BS show, and we've all seen it or smelled it, BS in the workplace. So give me an example from the past that could be a company culture, questionable leadership, or poor work ethic, a time when you just had to say, that's BS?
I don't think you've forgotten I'm in the record industry.
You get three stories.
The entire record industry. And I can't say that about the booking agency side, the touring side. That's pretty straight up these days. The accounting on that is pretty straightforward, and it has gotten a lot safer and a lot more, on the level, I guess you could say. The management side, same thing. We have great management, but the record industry side, that which was created by the large labels, is just a mess. I don't know. Have you tuned in? I think the first episode, it's an HBO show called Vinyl. Just started playing, and I watched the first episode, and it quickly sums up what the record industry is all about.
That's
and it's all
Mick Jagger and Scorsese, right?
Yes, yeah.
Last night, was it? It's this week that the first one. Yes, because
yeah.
I watched a part of it last night.
It is all bullshit.
Yeah.
And he talks about that right off the bat of how less than 10% of the acts on a label make money, but they don't lose money on the other 90% because the bands actually end up paying back the label the money that they're initially loaned. So basically the whole thing is a loan at a really bad interest rate. And all the tricks that they've used over the years. So yeah, it's
and that's bullshit.
It's real bullshit.
That's
we could get real
serious
deep into that.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
Damn. Wow. So what's one example of and don't name the person or anything, but what's one example of an instance where one individual just struck a chord of being a BSer? And what did they do?
I think it was our first label situation where we put out a record, and as that record was going through its infancy and into its maturity of what songs they were going to play, and that they were going to play a second single and try and get more promotion behind it, we and our management asked the label, we said, well, do we need to start working on new material for the second record? And they said, no, don't worry about it. We'll deal with that after this album cycle is done. And we said, well, there's a provision in the contract that says we need to turn in some new demos to you guys. Don't worry, we're still working this record. And don't you know, after we get done with this first album cycle, we said, well, we'd like to start a second record. And they said, no, we think we're going to drop you from the label. And we're like, well, why is that? Well, you never turned in any demos to us, so we don't owe you the $50,000 that says if we drop you, you get this money. You basically breached the contract. And we said, well, you told us not to. And they said, really? Prove it.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So we were released from the label, which, in the end is not a bad thing to get released quickly. We had friends that were not released quickly, and they were sort of put in this purgatory for a year, maybe 2 years, where they weren't allowed to release anything, and the record label didn't want them to release anything, but they wouldn't let them go. They released us pretty quickly because of this situation, and we were happy to move on.
And who'd you move on to?
We moved on to a label called Razor and Tie, and they were one of the largest independent record labels in the country, and they were out of New York, and we had a really nice relationship.
How'd
with
you
them.
find them? And how were you already looking into someone, or did it happen these guys said you're gone and you had to go find someone?
We thought we had a stable situation that we were going to make a second record, so we were not looking for anything. We immediately sort of regrouped and said, well, what can we do quickly to get a product out? And that's when we put together Live and a live CD, which was Live from Nick's Fat City on the South Side, just to keep the Clark's name out there, to keep product out there while we looked for a new label situation. And it was probably about a year or two later that Razor and Tie picked up on it, on the band, because our management went out and pursued a couple of label situations.
So when you did the Live at Nick's Fat City, you guys just distributed?
Yeah, we went right back to business. We said, why should we wait around for another label? We had waited years and years for a first label to pick us up, and we were unsure about whether that would happen again. And we said, look, we got to take care of business on our own. We can't just sit by and watch time go by.
So you guys do the Nick's Fat City, and you tape that, and do you just sell that to that mailing list, and you get people to buy it that way?
Yeah.
And about how much of that did you sell during that? I know you're not going to exactly remember, but like, was it tens of thousands?
I think it was. It was probably over 10,000, 15,000. I mean, back in those days, in that segment of 8 or 10 years when we released a couple of projects on our own, we were up over 20 to 30,000 CDs at that time, which is almost impossible these days for independent bands to work those kinds of numbers. Pretty impressive.
That is impressive. It is impressive. It's really a grassroots, do-it-yourself messaging approach that worked not only in the songwriting, but also in the actual marketing of it, which is impressive. So let's go the other way and put you on the spot and your biggest learning experience when maybe you were the BSer looking back.
And I just mentioned it. It was when myself and the rest of us all had day jobs and we had band jobs that we were playing now Wednesday nights, Thursday nights, Friday nights, Saturday nights, and we just kind of bullshitted our way through work at that point. You know, I would have this sales job. I would go in for the morning meeting, and if it was a night after we played, I would say I'm going on sales calls, and that sales call was inevitably on my couch. And I'd take a couple hours and just hang out at home and then go back at the end of the day and said, nothing much happened. So I think we all sort of just got through work the best we could until the inevitable came that we could move ahead on our own.
How long did it take your sales manager to realize you weren't actually making calls?
She was onto it way before I think anybody else in the office would have been. I wasn't a very impressive salesperson to begin with, so I believe I was hanging by a thread after the first week I was there.
And how long did you last in that position?
Probably 2 years.
Whoa. Wow. Did you hit any of your sales numbers?
Yeah. During the holidays, impressive. It was impressive, yes.
Wow. Oh, you sales managers listening.
Don't hire me.
Don't hire musicians.
Don't hire budding musicians.
That's exactly right. So going off the show path of normal, I just want to kind of, it's really interesting, I think, to Suzanne and I plus the audience. Walk us through then what happens next. You get this new label, and just what song did it? What couple of big shows did it when you started really seeing the trajectory towards where you've ended up?
We put out what CD is that? I don't even remember this. See, this is the problem with putting out 11 or 12 CDs. Well, we put out our first CD on Razor and Tie, and the song "Better Off Without You."
Okay.
Was on that CD, and that's the one that really took off. That's the one that they really pushed. They went after radio. We got a spot at the end of, do you remember the Anna Nicole show?
Yes.
She briefly had a reality show, and they used Better Off Without You as the end credits. So there's this thing that happens when you sign with a label, that there becomes an immediate legitimacy, that you've graduated to another level. You've gone from being in the college ranks to being a pro. So there's an immediate growth in national audience, as long as the record company is doing their business and promoting and getting the song to radio stations. Radio still has so much power to legitimize and grow bands. And that's what happened. We got radio play, and we started to travel the country, and we went from taking a van and a trailer to taking a tour bus on a few different tours, and it expanded. It just kept growing and growing. Locally, it expanded. WDVE, WYEP were playing the songs, and all of a sudden, when you're heard on the radio, to reiterate, there's a sense of legitimacy to what you're doing.
I'm sure you remember it. So when's the first time you heard the Clarks on the radio. Where were you and what station was it? I'm assuming it's DVE.
No, before that, actually. It was the old Double X.
Okay. Oh, just went to the reunion show.
Okay.
I was trying to convince Suzanne to go. It wasn't as good as the previous one. I guess it was the 25th or 25th one was great, but this one wasn't as good. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I digress.
They started to play a song from our first album, and the song they were playing is Help Me Out.
Okay.
And I remember being in my car at the time. I'm driving down the road, and I come to a stoplight, and the song comes on the radio, and I'm bouncing in my seat. I am pounding on the steering wheel, and I'm in a fishbowl. I can't celebrate with my friends. My girlfriend's not there to hug. My parents aren't there. And I'm looking around at all the other cars and wondering how many people around me are listening to this thing, and I'm in this solemn environment where I can't celebrate. But it was like a real personal, interesting thing. And when I got back over to the Clark house, we all burst out and were high-fiving and drinking beers and whatever. But that moment was a really lonely moment.
Yeah. And it was pre the proliferation of cell phones, so you couldn't even text or call anybody.
No, I would have had to stop at the phone booth and start putting dimes in at the time. Yes. Not even quarters, dimes.
So then it goes to a little bit different. Where were you when the Anna Nicole closing credits came on? Because that is pretty big. That show at that time wasn't like top 10 or anything, but it had notoriety.
Yeah.
And everybody checked it out at least once. So like anybody in our demo at that time, 25 to 40-year-olds checked it out at least once. So where were you when you first heard the credits?
We were on a tour bus, and it's funny you should ask about that particular time, because in an equally bizarre situation, we were on a tour bus somewhere in the middle of the country, and we tuned in the show on the tour bus. Like, oh, here it is, and we suffered through this show. Just suffered through, It was
said
hard.
everyone checked it out once and only once.
Yeah. And we get to the end of the show, and the show runs a few seconds long, and they end up not even playing the theme song, except maybe for a couple of notes at the end of the song. And we just all looked at each other like, what was that? But then in the subsequent shows, they did have a good chunk of it in there.
Yeah.
And then you could really hear it, and that made it all better.
I'm gonna keep going down the career path because I do want you to just talk about multiple milestones with now you've got the Anna Nicole, and then there's probably some in between this, but give me a couple in between this and then the Letterman show, and then keep going after that, because Letterman was 2004, I think.
2004. And I think I've always explained it as, when people have asked, how did the band stay together so long? And it was due to the carrots that kept dangling in front of us. You would chase after something and get it, and something else would plop down in front of us. And we were able to put out the Let It Go CD on Razor and Tie.
That's your fifth, I think, right?
Don't ask me numbers.
Oh, okay.
I barely remember that title for you. Let It Go was the first album with Razor and Tie. Second is Another Happy Ending. So that was a really good product that we put out.
Okay.
And we get to Fast Moving Cars, and it's a project that we were working on, again, as we were traveling around the country, and sort of a little backstory to this record and how we got onto the Letterman show. We're traveling around in a tour bus. We had submitted demos to Razor and Tie, some songs that we thought were really good. And as we're traveling around, I was working on another song that was a lot different than the rest. And we get word from our management that they hated everything that we had done up to that point. They didn't like it. They didn't want it on a record. They said, go back and write new stuff, which is always frustrating because you've really thrown your heart out into the tunes. And I was in the middle of working on a song that I thought was outside the box. That I said to the guys in the bus, I said, that's it. I'm not even going to finish this song because they definitely won't like this song. It's not like anything else we've ever done. I threw my hands up, kind of just having a little hissy fit because of this situation. And they said, no, you got to finish that song. Good song. And I said, okay, I'll try. As the rest of this tour went on, I did end up finishing it and presented it to the band a couple of weeks later. And the song that I almost threw out the window is the song that we ended up playing on the David Letterman show and became the single to that record, which is called Hell on Wheels. Now, the way they got the song is Dave's personal assistant is or was from Squirrel Hill, and her father was ailing at the time, so on the weekend, she would drive back and forth from Pittsburgh to New York. She happened to buy our record, heard the song Hell on Wheels, and knew that he was a big race car fan, put it on his exercise mix tape or iPod or recording mini disc, whatever it was at the time. He heard it, asked who the band was, and that was at the point where our record label was approaching shows of that ilk to see if we could perform on it. And the stars aligned, and they called her, and she said, yeah, let's get you guys on the show, and that's how it came about.
We're talking with Greg Joseph of the Clarks. He's also a professor at Point Park University Sports Arts and Entertainment Program. He's on the board of WYEP and just giving us some great stories. He's talking about how the Clarks were booked for the David Letterman show. Let's go down that path because I'm sure that whole day was something special. So tell us about it.
Yeah, the whole couple of days were interesting because the Republican National Convention was going on at the time. That would have been then shortly after 9/11. And New York was on this lockdown. It was really bizarre. Cops everywhere, streets shut down. They had the New York City Police, blue and white, sawhorses out on the street and barricades everywhere. So the town was a little bit surreal and odd at the time. But we get to New York, and our crew goes over to the Letterman studios, to the Ed Sullivan Theater, and they load in. And we come over a few hours later, and we set up and we do our sound check. And one of the guys from the show, he was in some of the skits, and I don't recall what his name is, comes up to me and he says hi, and I say hello to him. And he said, it's really great to have you here. And I was just like, what? I didn't think I heard him right, because they have bands in there all the time. And I'm just thinking these guys are New York guys. They're just going to be rude to us, and they're just going to have an attitude, and they won't care one way or another. But he took a real interest. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, your crew came in here professionally. They set everything up. They knew how to get to sound check. You guys got to sound check. You knew how to go through sound check. You tuned your guitars. You did everything. You were done timely. He said, do you know how many bands we have in here that can't even tune their guitars? And I said, really? And that set my day in a totally different direction. I was calm, collected, and I realized that we really deserved to be there that day.
So now that you go through the sound check and everything, and what happens next as far as where do they put you? What do you do? When do you first talk to Letterman? All that
that's
stuff.
The fun part. Yeah, this is just a spectacular day, and I never forget the details of this day. They put us upstairs in one of the dressing rooms. Each dressing room is on a different floor, and we have space to ourselves to practice the song, and family members and wives are with us. And we never do get to meet Dave before the show. We knew we would meet him a little bit later, but we knew Farrah Fawcett was going to be on the show.
Wow.
So Scott shows up with a Farrah Fawcett T-shirt with that famous poster.
Oh, the one we all had.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, with her in the orange or the red. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
That was the first poster most young boys had of a female on their wall. I think the next one was Cheryl Teagues, or who was, I don't know who the next one was. But anyway, so he slaps that T-shirt on, and we were just like, oh, this is going to be fun, And the other great thing that happened was down in the basement is another dressing area for like multiple people. And I'm a huge soccer fan, played in high school and in college. And it's the U.S. women's national soccer team who had just won the, I think, Olympic gold or the World Cup. I think it would have been the Olympics at that point. So, of course, I take some CDs and I go down to the basement because I want to go and meet everybody. Mia Hamm, Brandy Chastain.
Did she rip her shirt off when she saw you?
I ripped my shirt off when I saw her. It wasn't as impressive. Got down on my knees and and they were
She
just
would beat your ass.
yeah. That's why I got on my knees. That we had such a good time. We went down and took pictures and just hung out, and that was a really memorable part of the day too. So
Did you see Farrah? Did you get to meet Farrah?
We saw her in passing as we were about to go on. She was being ushered out of the building.
Was this the one she was incoherent on?
I'm pretty sure
That's sweet. What a great memory.
Yeah.
Folks, if you remember that, Google it. Farrah was on Letterman completely incoherent.
I'm pretty sure that was the time, but don't quote me on that one because I know she was on a couple of different times. Yeah. One time she was better, and one time she was in that state.
Yes.
But then we got a chance to get up there on stage and we played, and that 3.5 minutes just seemed like it was like 20 seconds.
Wow.
And you just wanted to play longer, and you just started to get into the groove of things when the song ends. And it was the very end of the song, and Dave came over and shook our hands, and that was it. That was the end of the performance.
How about the serendipity of you, the person working for Dave, putting the song on there?
Yeah. And you realize that you can be the most talented person in the world, but without a lot of luck. A lot of luck. Things may never happen. If that doesn't happen, does that day happen? Does the credibility happen? Do sales after that happen?
What I think played a big role for you guys is from the beginning you were marketers. Some of the things you were talking about doing in the mid to late 80s that you guys did through your side jobs did help you to tell your story better than others. So if you already have a good product and then you can tell your story through the marketing that you guys did through your DIY approach, that set you up to where you were good already and had the product and had some knowledge, and you were able to get someone like that. So let's talk about the messaging. That I want to get into our definition of marketing and have you give us a success story. But DVE did really become a big stakeholder, a big advocate. Talk about who might have did that, and was it with Jim Crenn? Was it with Paulson? Was it with Randy, whoever? Talk about that, because I think that had to play a huge role in your exposure.
Yeah, we had a manager at the time, a local guy that he worked his way from working at National Record Mart to working at the Caesar Angler, and just a real hustler. He's one of those guys that is still in the industry today because he still hustles. And his name was Michael Whited, and he was our first manager. And he was a guy that was always pushing to us to be bigger than what we were, to act bigger, to make the band look bigger. And a huge part of that is to get on radio. And he would, at every opportunity, get us to do an event for DVE. Oh, do you need a band? We'll come up and play for free for this party, or we'll do this for free. We made ourselves available when we needed to make ourselves available, and they took notice of that. There's no sense of payola, or there's no sense of favor for favor type thing, but when they realized that we were responsible, we would show up, we would do good performances, we had a fan base, they took a real interest in putting the songs on the radio. And then when they started to get the feedback, positive feedback, then they continued to put more songs on the radio. So it really did start with being on the local show on DVE and sort of graduating up into regular airplay. And I think it would have been possibly Gene Romano at the time, who was saying, this is what we're going to play, this is what we're not going to play. He gave us an opportunity to get on the air, and we really took advantage of it.
It's really how it should be, though. You have a good product, you work hard, and you show that you're willing to give to get, and I think that's huge. And it ties to the definition we at Mass Solutions use, that how marketing is about clearly defining your target markets, then doing the necessary marketing intel to find out what they want. And then you develop it or even tweak it based on what you find out. And you talked about that, how as you got customer feedback, you got audience feedback, you were able to tweak things and then give it to them when and where they want it at a price they're willing to pay, and then telling them about it again and again. Unfortunately, most people get hung up on thinking that marketing is that last piece, that telling them about it again and again. But you really have to clearly define the target markets, do the intel and ask them or find out what they think and then tweak accordingly so you can give it to them when and where they want it at a price they're willing to pay. So talk about, based on that definition, what you see as your biggest, most amazing moment in marketing and how you guys have used the definition of target audience and how you used customer feedback and audience feedback. Your biggest marketing success.
This is the big idea. This is the big marketing success.
This is the big marketing success.
Okay.
The most amazing marketing success.
Okay.
Then what's the big idea will be next.
I think it gets back to what I just mentioned, and that was our first manager saying, look bigger than you are when you're small, and conversely, look smaller than you are when you're big. Don't outgrow your fans that there is no connection. And I think the connection is the big marketing tool for us. Fans want to connect with the band. We want to connect with them. I think the DVE airplay was a huge part of that. I think underplaying at clubs like the Decade, when it's a 300 capacity room and you know you can fit 500 people inside that room, do it. Make 200 people show up and not get in. Underplay and make you look bigger, because all of a sudden that becomes almost more important, the people that didn't get in, that they'll want to come earlier next time. They'll want to tell more people. And then you grow when you realize that the next club you grow into is almost too small for you as well.
Well, I can relate to that. And I think that one of the things that I want to ask you about is there were probably times you played clubs even before that, before you were going to underplay and get 500 people when you had 300. Talk about how, when you're in this kind of space, how important it is to be humble and be cognizant that you're helping someone too. I know having a DJ nowhere near anything, not even on a pimple on the butt of the Clarks, but as a DJ, there were times where I would DJ things saying, I've now elevated to where I don't need to do that, but I'm going to do that and be humble and help them. And you help that club by you guys playing there. Talk about that.
Yeah, and that's how you gain the political capital in town, by helping out and playing every now and then at a benefit that the club will do to help them raise money. And certainly they always make the bar money off of anything you do. But yeah, we've done our time of and enjoyed it, showing up at benefits in different places, doing the charity shows, the charity jams for WDVE whenever you raise money for different causes. We've shown up at a lot of different places to just throw out that capital, and it returns. It comes full circle, and I don't think you can really go without that circle of friendship with people and reliability. DV does favors for us. We do favors for them. WYEP, the same thing. Happens with the universities. Happens in the clubs all over. I don't know if I answered your question directly, but yeah.
You did. It's an important part of your marketing. So, Greg, how can listeners contact you if they'd like to learn more about what you do, since you have so much going on with Sonic Dog and the teaching and, of course, the Clarks?
You can go to my Facebook page, Greg Joseph, on Facebook, and you can go to gregjosephmusic.com. SonicDogStudios.com will kind of take you to the same site, and those are the main areas. I'm not a Twitterer. But yeah, you'll find all the information on the website, and it has information about the Jingle Studio, a little bit of information about the band, also about teaching and clinics that I do, about songwriting in the music business, and I think that pretty much covers everything.
Well, that's great. We'll put that stuff on the show notes. I want to thank you, Greg, for being on the show. I want to thank Suzanne for connecting us, our producer, Suzanne Mayer, who finds fantastic guests like you. This was a great episode. Every single guest has been fantastic, and they all bring something unique. And just those three things are the teaching and the unique program that you're teaching, the Sonic Dog, and, of course, the big brand name of the Clarks brought a whole new dimension to the show. So thank you both.
Well, thank you, Dave. This has been a lot of fun. Yeah.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us for the No Bullshit Marketing Show. Visit boldsolutionsnobs.com for show notes plus additional marketing and messaging resources. And Greg, you have to sign up for light reading. You'll receive valuable strategies every other week to improve your marketing and transform your message. It really is light, intended to be read in 2 minutes or less. And the goal is that it will trigger bright ideas for you. To sign up, visit masssolutions.biz. Let's all sign up for that. And remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea, and build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions.